Welcome to Real Dudes Podcast. I'm your host, Karrington, and with me, I've got Cody.
Hey.
Yeah, I didn't do my hey, did I?
No, you didn't, so I stole it.
That's fair enough. And today we actually have a fantastic and very special guest. He is an editor over at Game Informer. He's a Sonic fan like yours truly, and he's got some fantastic hair. We've got Brian Shea. Brian, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Not so bad. So, Brian, before we get started, how about you tell us and our listeners a little bit about yourself? Because I tried looking up stuff about you. There wasn't a whole lot out there. So, just how about you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Well, I currently live in Minneapolis, as do most of the Game Informer editors. We're headquartered there. But I grew up just outside of Baltimore, Maryland, and I lived there, through my college years, or I went to college on the East Coast of Maryland. After that, I moved around a little bit. I moved to Pittsburgh. I moved to Austin, Texas, and now I'm in Minneapolis, as I said before. Guess we can talk about how I got into gaming.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that.
So I actually never owned an NES, but that's where I kind of got my start.
Okay.
My aunt and uncle, on actually both my parents' sides, they had NESs, and whenever we went over family gatherings, I would always escape to either the attic or the basement, depending on which set of aunt and uncles it was, and just dig into their collection. I remember one aunt and uncle had they had Legend of Zelda, they had Bubble Bobble, and they had I think it was Gold 2, the soccer game, and I believe they had maybe it was Bases Loaded. Okay. Or RBI baseball, one of the old school baseball games, and I just played the crap out of those whenever I went over there. And then my other aunt and uncle on my mom's side, they actually had the Mario Duck Hunt combo pack, and then they had Tetris. So I would go over to their house and I would play so much that actually one day I came over to their house and it was gone, and they told me they sold it. And I found out years later they actually hid it every time I would come over because they actually wanted to spend time with me, and I would just disappear into the basement and not pay any attention to them if they didn't do that. I finally got an SNES for Christmas one year. That was my first console I ever actually owned, and I didn't have to go to an aunt and uncle or a neighbor's house to play. So that was awesome. And then you mentioned my my love of Sonic that has spanned all the way back to the Genesis days, and that happened because shortly after I got my NES or my SNES, we had to relocate to Florida for a few months, and in that time, my parents accidentally packed away my SNES way in the back, so we couldn't get to it. So they went out and they bought me a Sega Genesis to make up for the fact that they accidentally threw my only video game way in the back of all of our stuff. So I got a combo pack that came with Echo the Dolphin and Sonic 2.
Very nice. So, question: since you, as a young age, why were you drawn to more Sonic as opposed to Mario, like most people?
Oh man! So I beat Mario World before I ever had a Genesis, and I adored Super Mario Kart. I played both of those games. Those two and Donkey Kong Country I played religiously with my dad. So I love those games. I mean, Mario World, right, I would say is my favorite platformer of all time. So I don't know if I would necessarily say that I was drawn too much to Sonic over Mario, but I definitely think after I beat Mario World, it was pretty I didn't even play Yoshi's Island until recently because it's just I once I discovered Sonic, it was kind of like I don't know, I loved that, plus the combination of I discovered Game Genie at the same time, so I loved pseudo modding the experience and just seeing what I could do with these games. There was one, I had a combination going where it was you entered a code in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So basically, if you remember Sonic and Knuckles, you opened up the top and you would stack Sonic 3 or whatever other game on top of it, and it would, it was two cartridges stacked on top of it. So I would take Game Genie, which was another cartridge that you would stack on top of that. So it had a 3-cartridge tower working there. And it was pretty easy to knock over, but I found some pretty cool codes for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and it was don't lose rings when hit. So you would get hit, and the rings would go flying, but you would not, your counter would not go down to 0. So you could just keep collecting the rings that you dropped, and it would just, basically you would just keep multiplying the rings every time you got hit. And then there was another one that, if you were supersonic, you didn't lose rings. So I just had a lot of fun, like just breaking that game. So I think it was a combination of I really loved the game as it was and as it was created, but I also had this kind of like revelatory phase of just experimenting with what a game could do, like if you kind of stepped outside of the boundaries of what it was intended for.
Mm-hmm.
Which, looking back, I mean, it's kind of remarkable. I never got into like modding or like anything like that, because that's definitely, I was set down the path like from like second grade is when I got into Game Genie and like really experimenting with that stuff.
That's actually quite awesome and very entertaining. I'm going to ask more questions about that later, but I do want to ask, since you did have that experience, like messing with games at an early age, what made you want to get into journalism?
Oh man, so in fourth grade, so I was only in Florida for like maybe 4 months, 5 months. I think it was a semester in school, so it wasn't long at all. And then we moved back to Maryland in a different area. So I was a new kid in second grade, and third grade, I think it was either third or fourth grade. I wrote for my new elementary school's paper, and I was just doing like sports stuff. So I was super into baseball. So I was like interviewing like local minor leaguers. That was the first interview I ever did. I interviewed it was third grade actually. Now that I think of it, a local minor league pitcher, and I was like the coolest thing ever to me was going to the minor league stadium like during one of their off days. They were having a practice, and the guy came out of the locker room, and I got to sit down with him for like, I'm sure it felt like an hour, but I'm sure it was like 15 minutes of asking him questions. I actually just found my note sheet from that when I was going through my storage a couple months ago. It was kind of cool to look back on. So I got into that, and then fourth grade rolled around. I did a biography on my all-time favorite baseball player, Cal Ripken Jr., and I also did a biography on my grandfather. And that combined with the fact that I enjoyed writing for the paper when it was about like sports and everything kind of hinted that I enjoyed writing if it was, stuff that I liked instead of like papers that like school would assign. But I kind of lost that love for a few years, like all the way up through, I would say, like late high school. I was kind of just like, oh, I hate writing so much. And it's kind of funny because I also hated like working out and like exercising of any kind. And now I like do both of those every day, so it's voluntarily. So it's kind of funny looking back now. But in high school and college, I got like more into like writing, even if it was just like assigned stuff. But of course, I loved writing about what I loved. So when I was into college, I was getting more and more into music, particularly rock music. And a friend found that I knew from Velvet Revolver, if you know that band. I knew her from a fan forum for that band, and she asked me if she was like, "Hey, I'm starting this website of my own. I don't know, it's kind of stupid. Would you like to like just check it out and see what you think?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. I'll take a look." And I was like, "Yeah, this looks pretty cool. If you ever need any help, just let me know." And just kind of like throwing it out there as a gesture. And she was like, "Well, actually, if you want to help me run it," I'm like, "Oh, okay." So it started out as like kind of like forums and like just kind of moderation and everything and like forming a community. But I don't know, I felt kind of unfulfilled doing that. So even though I was like going to school full time and working part time, I started kind of forming it into like a full on like reporting website. Like I would post news, but like the big thing was I started like reaching out to bands on MySpace and like DMing them and be like, "Hey, I write for this website," like just kind of playing it off as bigger than it actually was. Like, we write for this website. Here's other guys we've interviewed. It's real easy. We'll just send you a few questions. You just answer them on your own time. We just, we ask that you get it like within a couple weeks. Like, we know you're busy, like either recording an album or touring or whatever. But yeah, like I got like surprisingly big names in that. Like I got like the new lead singer of Boston. I got
nice.
Miles Kennedy, who is Slash's singer, and he's also the singer of Alter Bridge. And at the time, he kind of unknown to the world, but I caught wind of it. He was actually accepted, or he was auditioning for Led Zeppelin at the time, which was kind of cool. A bunch of like smaller bands that I really dig. I still listen to them, a lot of them to this day. So yeah, it just kind of that kick-started like, wow, I really love doing this. So I did that in my spare time, and we had like an off-topic section, and I was like, we write album reviews all the time. We interview people. I'm playing Fallout 3 right now. I'd really like to try like reviewing a game. So I reviewed Fallout 3. I gave it a 5 out of 5 because I freaking loved it, and I still think it's an awesome game. But that was the game that inspired me to write my first review, and it was a lot of fun. And if I found it today, which I know the site's long gone, so it would probably be near impossible to hunt it down. But I'm sure it's absolute garbage. Just like a lot of my old writing is. A lot of everybody's old writing is absolute garbage. But that was the thing that like kicked me off to like, I like writing about games too. It's not just music. And obviously I've been a gamer I've been into games longer than I've been into music or sports. So then I started writing about games in earnest through a website that's actually no longer around called Examiner. Okay. So that was just a lot of people will disparagingly write it off as like a content farm, in that like they would just bring in like legions of writers who they would just like not have any editorial oversight really, and they would just be able to publish whatever they want on their topic. And that is true to an extent, or to a large extent rather. But it gave me an opportunity I started off as like the local Pittsburgh concert reporter, and I also asked if I could jump over to the national edition, writing about, at the peak of Guitar Hero and Rock Band frenzy, I wrote about music video games at like their peak for their national edition, which was kind of cool. So that was like my first real like game journalism, if you want to call it that. It was more criticism and like just reporting on all the news. And then from there I got an editor position at like it was another volunteer site. The video game domain, it was called. I don't know if it's still around, but that was years ago. And I think it was actually the Xbox domain. But from there, I co-founded a website. It was called videogamewriters.com, and ran it with somebody else for a few years. Then he left to write for another website, so I ended up heading it up as editor-in-chief for the last few years. And then I was doing freelance. Sorry, this is a very long-winded explanation.
You're good.
I did freelance for a couple of years for official Xbox magazine, nice. IGN, Kotaku, biography.com of all places, Joystick. So yeah, I definitely got my byline out there, and I think that's extremely important if you're wanting to do that. And I worked with a variety of editors, which is also another extremely important thing if you're kind of like an up-and-coming writer or trying to do this for a living. And then, over the course of that time, I was applying to all kinds of like full-time jobs, one of which was Game Informer, which I think this was my third application that I finally got accepted. So I applied for the associate editor position that opened up in 2014. And I got it in late 2014. They asked me to relocate in early 2015. I was more than happy to. I was working full-time jobs that I absolutely did not like. I was a computer consultant, so I was working for a Fortune 500 company that contracted people out to other companies to do computer-related tasks. So I was working for all these major companies doing different computer tasks, like whether it's IT or being a test coordinator for a company, building an application, stuff like that. So I was more than happy to relocate from Austin, Texas at the time to Minneapolis to take the job at Game Informer. And then after a couple years, I became the digital editor, which means I oversee our digital issue, which releases every month when we do our cover reveal.
Very nice, very nice. So being in Minneapolis now and moving from, at the time, Texas, as far as the weather is concerned, did that take any adjustment at all? So going from a relatively warm climate to now it snows a lot in the winter?
I mean, absolutely. Austin itself was an adjustment. I mean, I grew up, the Mid-Atlantic where, we got all four seasons pretty heavily. Like, it's super hot this week in Maryland. But it also gets super cold. I remember, the blizzard of '98 was I remember looking up as a kid, at the piles of snow and just being in awe of how much snow was on the ground. Texas, takes the summers to a whole new level, and Minneapolis takes the winters to a whole new level. So, at the time in Texas, I was going for a run outside during lunch, which, it's a really stupid thing. I was going for a run outside during my lunch break, at my job, running a 5K every single day for, during the summer, which I remember the hottest one I think was 110 degrees. And it's really not a smart thing to do, so I don't recommend it. But yeah, I mean, it's just different degrees of getting used to different things. Like, it took me a while to get used to the summers in Austin, and it has taken me equally as long, if not a little bit longer, to get used to the winters up here in Minneapolis. Like, I think that the intensity of the winters don't really kill me as much, but like the length of some of the winters is what it just beats you down over months. Like, just the first 2 winters weren't as bad, but this past winter just nearly killed me. I felt like it was April and we got a huge blizzard. Like, I think it was like April 23rd or something like that of this year. It was like, wow, we're getting like 24 inches of snow today. Like, what is going on? Like, this is supposed to be spring. But yeah, this past winter almost did me in. But I get it. Like, it is nice, like 8 months out of the year, 9 months out of the year. So I can't really complain all that much. Like, it's super nice up here right now. Aside from the fact that today it just so happens to be storming.
Fair enough. Yeah, we're in Ohio ourselves, so we have for the past few years it's been fairly mild winters. But I know Minneapolis was it gets pretty cold up there. We were up there in March for the Game Informer 300 celebration, and
oh, nice.
That was a big. It was still pretty cold compared to Ohio.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, that was March, right? Yeah. So yeah. It definitely. You were not out of the woods just yet. I mean, it was. I think we had a slightly warmer than average March, but I mean, then, like I said, we dipped right back into the depths of hell with April. It was rough.
I can only imagine. Now, on Game Informer's website, you are listed as the digital editor. Is there a difference between like a digital editor and like a normal editor at all?
So all the editors at Game Informer have to be kind of like jack of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
And like we all write news. We have a news editor who's in charge of that. We have a reviews editor who's in charge of that department. We have a previews editor who's in charge of that department.
Mm-hmm.
But we all end up doing kind of all of it. Like, I just finished up a review today. And I'll have several previews this coming month, I'm sure. We write features. We all kind of do everything, but some of us are department leads. So like I mentioned, we have a reviews editor, a previews editor, we have a features editor.
Mm-hmm.
They're all kind of the department leads. We have a video producer and editor. So for digital editing, it's a little bit different. So I head up our digital issue, and so we have our print magazine, as you know, and we have a digital issue that launches simultaneously. So what I do is I kind of oversee the creation of that. We have a production team that I work hand in hand with.
Okay.
So they're like our graphic designers that make the articles look real good. Like, we provide them with the words and the assets, and they just work magic. It's incredible what they can do. And so every time you see like a really cool looking article in our magazine, whether it's print, digital, or like one of our specialized website articles,
mm-hmm.
It's in large part thanks to them. They're incredible. So I work hand in hand with them with like designing the digital layout. Like they make it look good, and I kind of like design the functionality. Like, I say, hey, we're gonna link to this other article. So like if we say we published a review of like an upcoming game, like Forza Horizon 4,
mm-hmm.
We might have done a video of that game on our website. So if you're reading the digital issue, you could have a link in the digital issue that, like, if you're on your tablet, you just tap it, and it'll take you to like a video of us playing the game for like 25 minutes or something like that. So I design every page that does that, like all the different interactivity that you can do. And I work with the production team to kind of make that happen. So I just kind of I design. I basically lay it out in terms of like, here's what I want us to do with this page, and I work with them, and they are the ones that go and implement it. And then also, like I said, make it look amazing, which I could never do. Like I tried that in my past. Like I actually made, when I was at my old website, I actually made a digital magazine, which is kind of weird now looking back at just from scratch, a PDF version. It's not great, but it's just interesting, like how I did that, and now I'm in charge of a digital magazine itself, not from a visual standpoint, but
right.
So so that's the gist of it. Now, right now, we're currently the kind of the design phase is behind us, so now I'm kind of in the testing phase. So now I'm going through with printouts of our upcoming issue at my desk, and I'm going through every single page and making sure all the paragraphs and the words made it over to our current issue, the digital version. So making sure that it lines up one-to-one with our print edition, so that way, like, the people who subscribe digital are getting the same things, plus the interactivity that you can't get from a print magazine. So really, like, it's the same content, but you're getting some added bonuses for going digital is basically what it is, and I'm kind of making sure all that stuff is falling in line.
Yeah. Very nice. Sounds like a lot of work.
In addition to all the other stuff. Yeah, it is a lot of work. It pretty much, I would say in total, I mean, there's some breaks, like after I submit our design document, there's some breaks where I don't have a ton of digital responsibilities. Like there's a bunch of stuff like coordinating with other editors to get certain pieces of content in, but there's like a small break, and then we do like intense proofing for like 4 or 5, 6 days. So I would say in total it takes me a little bit over a week every month to just devote 100% to our digital magazine.
Wow. All right. And then on top of that, I'm sure you're busy stuff doing stuff like the Game Informer show when they ask you to come on and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, like I said, we all kind of do everything, and I'm always trying to get more involved with everything. So any chance I get, I'm trying to get on the Game Informer podcast, or the Game Informer show podcast. Any chance I get, I'm trying to do videos of the games that I'm reviewing or playing. So yeah, I like to keep busy. So I'm always trying to get more reviews or write more features whenever I have some downtime. But it can be tricky to coordinate all the different responsibilities that I have. But I think I've gotten accustomed to it. Now that I've been doing it for like 2 years as like the acting digital editor and now official digital editor.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fair enough. And so far, working at Game Informer, what's the one thing that stands out to you the most that's just like, wow, I can't believe I got to do this. I'm doing this. This is my job.
Oh, man, there's a few. I mean, do you want just like moments or like general stuff?
How about first general stuff, and then we can go into like any moment that may have stood out to you.
I mean, there's always the thing of like, I get to play a video game and it counts as part of my job. Like, I used to, if I wanted to play a game at work, I used to have to like take a break and walk outside or like sneak it at my cubicle, like playing like Plants vs. Zombies on my phone, something like that. But like, it's like super cool to me that like, it's a lot of work, but I also at the end of the day get to not only write about what I love, but I get to, do what I love at work. Like I get to, if a game is coming out and I'm assigned to the game, like that is my job for the foreseeable future, is playing that game to get ready to prep either content or a review. Mm-hmm. I think that's just the overall coolest thing is there's the misconception that like all games journalistic critics do is they play video games at work, and I mean there is a component of that, but it's also like there's a ton of work outside of that goes into being a games journalist or games critic, or especially putting together a magazine. But yeah, I think that's the coolest thing is that on occasion we do get to play video games at work, which is awesome.
Oh yeah, I'm sure, especially when I don't see you too much, but I'm sure that as far as like the super replay stuff, and as well as just doing like game reviews and previews, this seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's so much work, but it's also so much fun, and I love the fact that I get to do this every day, pretty much. Another thing I would say is just the people I get to work alongside. They're all incredibly talented. I remember like my first few months being there, I was like, wow, these guys are incredible. How do I stack up to these guys? Like, it was kind of like intimidating, but like you get into the flow of it. You learn the voice of the magazine, and you eventually almost feel like you belong with these people, like because they're all so talented, and you read their work constantly because we all edit our stuff for each other. So I'm consistently blown away by like the talent that I work alongside.
Oh, for sure, and I agree. Everyone there is talented. So, were you a fan of Game Informer before you started working there as well?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of funny. I was actually reflecting on this today. Like the two magazines that I subscribed to as a kid were Official Dreamcast magazine and Game Informer. And I believe the editor-in-chief was of the official Dreamcast magazine, was the editor-in-chief, or one of the editors of official Dreamcast magazine, ended up being the editor-in-chief that I pitched and got accepted my first freelance article that I ever wrote for OXM, which is kind of serendipitous now that I'm writing for Game Informer. So it's like the two magazines I subscribed to, I ended up working with the staffs that, the Xbox successor of the one magazine and then the actual magazine of the other one. So that's kind of crazy to think.
Connections like that seem to always happen in our day-to-day world. It's just like, wow, it's a small world, and when it happens, it can be mind-blowing.
It's such a small industry, and it's awesome because, I guess another thing that I love about my job is just being able to go around to all these events. Like, I'm really bummed I'm not going to PAX West this year. I got to go to that last year, and I've been a few times. But like E3 and the PAXs and even like PlayStation Experience, stuff like that. Like I love going to those, and it's almost like a rejuvenation time for me because like you're exhausted at the end of it, but you see like the players and like the fans of the industry so like up close and personal because you're right in the mix with all of them. And it's not like the constant negativity that you kind of see on social media and like just people complaining about everything. So it's a nice contrast to like kind of the negativity that can beat you down on social media because it's so much easier to complain online than it is to like tell somebody that they do great work, So you get a lot more of that, or at least that sticks out more. I wouldn't say you get a lot more than that because there are plenty of awesome folks on social media, but it just takes one jerk to ruin your day. Yeah. You kind of have to have thick skin to it, but it is nice to see like people with ear to ear smiles and people just having a freaking blast just all day long at these events, and it always kind of gives me a shot in the arm and gets me back in like all like upbeat about going to work and like, oh, I can't wait to go in and do this because like this is what the community really is all about. Like I love that feeling of like being reminded of that.
Oh, I bet. I haven't. So we have like a local cons here in Ohio, and going to them, I can see why you certainly feel that way. Were you able to go to E3 this past year?
I was actually not going to go. I was going to stay home and support the home team, but unfortunately, one of our editors who was slated to go had a health problem, and so I had to fill in with a week's notice. Which was crazy. Like I mean, usually you spend months planning E3, but I did get to go. I loved every second of it. I had a great time. I got to see Cyberpunk, the demo that everybody saw today. I got to see that behind closed doors back at E3. It was incredible. It blew me away then. I'm so happy that it's blowing people away because it's like I can finally like talk to people about it and not just be like telling them like, here's what happened. Like people can refer to it and be like, oh yeah, I saw that too. Like, you're talking to them. It's like the difference between telling somebody about a movie that you've seen that they haven't seen and, talking to somebody who's seen that movie and also thought it was cool.
Oh, I'm sure. Is that the game you would say, Cyberpunk 2077? Is that the game that blew you away walking away from E3 this past year?
Oh, for sure. And that won our game of the show this year. That was it was incredible. I mean, obviously, I love Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I'm excited for Fallout 76. Spider-Man can't come soon enough. Red Dead Redemption wasn't really at E3, but like those are the games I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, Cyberpunk. I would say that like the games beyond this year that I'm super looking forward to are Anthem, which was that February comes out, I think.
February,
and was it 22nd, I think. And then Cyberpunk, which comes out God knows when. But I those release dates can't come soon enough for me.
I wholeheartedly agree with that list, especially with Spider-Man just being a couple of weeks away. It needs to get here sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the edge of my seat for that game for ever since it really was announced that Insomniac was making a Spider-Man game. Like, oh man, that's the perfect fit. Those guys are known for cool traversal and cool gadgets, and yeah, I mean, Spider-Man's one of my favorite characters in any medium, so it's like, yeah, come on, like that's a slam dunk for me, and like. I've played it like once at E3. I messed around in the open world a little bit. I did a boss battle, so it's like, yeah, everything that I have played and like read about in our cover story has led me to believe that they're killing it. So I can't wait to see how it turned out.
you and me both. And so were you pretty jealous then when Reiner got to play it here recently?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I mean, he obviously loves that character as much, if not more, than I do, and like he knows that game inside and out. And he's played Insomniac games more than I have, so he's a perfect fit for that. So yeah, I mean, I get it, but I'm also super jealous of him, and I was super jealous that he got to go over to Insomniac to do the cover story as well. So I mean, he's obviously the right choice for that. But man, I could not be more jealous of being able to play more of that game. But hey, the bright side is so much more of it's going to be unspoiled for me than it was for him when I play the final version. So there's a silver lining.
There you go. Fair enough. So speaking of like events and things like that, the Game Informer 300 celebration, what was that like for you, being able to go there and just see everybody there and just that entire event?
I mean, it was really cool. I mean, you guys were there. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to say hi.
Oh, okay.
There were a lot of people there.
Yes, there were.
But basically, for those who weren't in attendance, we rented out, or we worked with a partnership with Fulton Brewing, and it's a local brewery here in Minneapolis, and they have, coincidentally enough, an IPA called the 300. Mm-hmm. So we worked with them to rebrand for the month of March 2018, rebrand their 300 with one of the cover art from our 300th issue. So I'm looking at it right now. You know, it says 300 Mosaic India Pale Ale, a celebration of Game Informer's 300th issue, and there's a kind of like a tube television in the background with press start, and there's a bunch of kind of generic game-looking logos flying out of it, or like icons flying out of it. Like, you know, like you got hearts, you have like a kind of like a pixelated controller, or like a Space Invader looking thing, but not Space Invaders, because I don't think any game company would probably approve of us putting things on a beer.
Right.
But but yeah, so we worked with them for this rebranding, and then we also hosted a party there, which we packed that local brewery.
Oh yeah.
And we had a live podcast there, and we you know, it was a blast. It was super fun. I was only on the podcast for a brief moment, and I was thrown an extremely difficult question, and I blanked completely. But you know, it was a fun time. Met a bunch of people who are readers of Game Informer, and it was super awesome. Like I am like really happy to have been able to go to that and to have been a part of Game Informer when that was all going on. And I mean, it was so much work leading up to that. Like the process of putting together. For those who don't know, we did our 300 top games of all time for our 300th issue, which was just the most massive undertaking of anything that I think I've ever been a part of in terms of in the field. Like just I think it took us weeks of day-long meetings, just coming in the morning. We would start at our meeting at like 10:30, and then we wouldn't leave until like 6:30. Like we would take a 45-minute break for lunch, and then we would come right back and do it up until like 6:30 or 7 every single night. Just talking about like the criteria that we were going to do. Like, all right, well let's get a baseline of which games we want. Like we know we're going to make it, so let's make a preliminary list of like X amount of games, and just the process of doing that was such an amazing thing to watch and also take part in. So I'm really glad I was here for that. I didn't get a chance to do the 200 issue, obviously, because that was long before my time. But actually, that was before I joined Game Informer. That was actually my favorite issue of any magazine ever, because it was such a cool thing to just leave on the coffee table and be able to thumb through and be like, oh, where did they rank Super Metroid? Where did they rank, Mario Kart? Whatever. Where did they rank Super Mario 64? It was just cool to thumb through that from time to time. And now, I've had some input in the latest one, and now I still look through that issue every once in a while, and it's great to have been here for that.
I agree.
Where did they rank Beyond Good and Evil?
Beyond Good and Evil fell off this time. It was number 200. It was number 200 last time in the top 200, but we kind of replayed that recently, and I think that some people were not as impressed with it in terms of how it aged recently.
Yeah, I could see that. It's still one of my favorite games of all time, though. It just holds a special place in my heart. So I do want to say real quick though, since we were able to go there like as a group, in total there's 4 of us, and all 4 of us were able to go to the celebration.
Oh, nice.
And I have a Sonic hat. It's like a 16-bit Sonic hat. And so when I was talking to everyone, they're like, "Oh, Brian Shea is gonna love it. He's gonna love that hat." So I did not get a chance to really see you there, so I didn't get a chance to really show off the hat, unfortunately. But I was just like, oh, I can't wait to show him. But I saw you briefly, but you were far away, and I didn't get a chance to say anything. But I just want to say that it was a lot of fun to go there and stuff.
Well, I was dodging you the entire party, so
Okay.
that was why you couldn't hunt me down. I
Gotcha.
saw you coming, and I just ducked into the bathroom or something.
Fair enough.
No, that's a bummer. I probably would have loved it. I was actually wearing my Game Informer beanie that our fine production member Margaret, actually, she's a knitter, so she made a Game Informer beanie for a few of us, and I was rocking that. So
Nice.
we could have complimented each other on our hats.
This is true. I'm upset we didn't get the chance to, but maybe next time.
Yeah, next time for sure. 400th issue.
Yeah, exactly. So I do want to say also real quick, we do sometimes play Overwatch with Reiner. Do you play
awesome.
Overwatch at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my girlfriend and I play pretty much every night. Starting on Mondays, we usually do Mystery to kind of get those arcade loot boxes, and then we jump over to Quick Play once we fulfill those obligations and maximize the loot boxes. We're going to be grinding a little bit this week because the Summer Games event is going to end in a couple of days.
Yeah, better get on that quick, before Lucio disappears.
Yeah,
Another year.
my heart skin, man.
I've had such terrible luck this event getting skins, so I really need to like grind and get I have like 10,000 coins, so I can buy 3 legendary skins if I want, but it's like, man, I'd really like to save those for like in case of emergency and like, a really awesome skin comes out for like the Halloween event, which I guess is the next one that they would do.
Yeah.
If that comes out and like the Halloween event starts and there's like an unbelievable like, I don't know, Genji skin. Not that I don't think anything's ever going to top the Blackwatch Genji skin, but if something really cool came out, I would like to have some surplus of coin in order to buy that. So I'm not a fan of like burning through 9,000 coins to get some skins, but I'm going to grind, get 3 more loot boxes at least before this event is over, and hopefully get at least one of the legendary skins I want.
There you go.
But yeah, I put in over 300 hours at this point since it came out.
Very nice. Who do you main as usually when you play like whatever? Really?
Oh man, it's so fluid at this point for me. Like I really do play everyone. Like the one I think it's easier to name the ones I play the least.
Okay. Which
would be I would say Ana for sure. Ana's the one that I'm just terrible with, and I've tried to play her, and I'm just not good with her at all. Oh man, who else? Like I might need to bring up a list of characters here because there's so many. And it's there's so many characters. It's hard to remember all of them. Let's see, Widowmaker. Yeah, I'm really bad at like standard sniping.
Okay.
So I would say Widowmaker and Ana, so the 2 most traditional snipers, aside from the fact that Ana can also heal.
Right.
But I would say, like, in terms of, like, the mains, right now it's probably Moira.
Good choice.
I mean, Soldier 76 is always a great all-purpose choice.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at my shelf of Overwatch Pop Finals.
Very nice.
Let's see, Reaper is always a good one when it's like a close range one, close range map.
Right.
But I would say that Diva's always a solid go-to. Junkrat and McCree, I would say, are the ones that round out my most played characters.
I can't.
Yeah, I would say that. Maybe May every once in a while, but yeah, those I would say that. I play so much, like a little bit of everything. Yeah, I would say those are probably my most gravitated towards.
I can't complain with that list at all. I'm a Diva main myself. I love her so much, and I was excited that she got her own animated short finally after all these years.
I mean, I have a cat named Diva.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's how I feel about that character.
Yep. So we are also like in a group chat with Reiner when we schedule like when we want to play and stuff Overwatch. I told him you were going to be here tonight, and
oh boy,
yeah, he said that I needed to call you out because you don't play comp and you're a big coward for it.
Yeah, I don't play comp. I just I don't know. I really don't like the format of like I don't have a squad in terms of like in terms of like a team of 6,
Right.
So it's like I just play with my girlfriend. So it's like we could if there was like a duos comp, then
Be all
I think
over
I
it.
would be all in on that.
Yeah.
But it sucks so much if you're playing with like randos and
Yeah.
somebody drops out, and then it's like, oh, well, I guess we're just 5v6 from now on.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
totally get that. That is a huge issue. Even with the penalties that they apply, it's still an issue.
Yeah, it's such an. And if I lose, like then I get penalized, even though like I don't know. It's annoying to me. Like I totally get why people love that. But I think that if I had a good crew, I probably would play more in competitive.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't blame you too much for that then. We also got a chance to tour the Game Informer office while we were up there.
Oh, nice.
Back in March. I do remember your desk specifically, and I gotta say it's a very impressive collection you have at your desk.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was nice because like I've never had a job like you heard where I came from. I came from pretty much corporate America, like epitomized.
Right.
So it's nice to finally have a desk or a job where I can have a desk that just I can go all out with collectibles. So that has definitely come back to bite me a little bit, like in terms of like the wallet, because I have spent so much money on collectibles. Like I've done everything from like, I've had friends who are in Japan, like coworkers who've gone to Japan for stuff, like pick me up things. I've done, like I've imported a Persona 5 figure from Japan. I've bought every single Overwatch Figma and Nendoroid. I bought a ton of Zelda Figma and Nendoroids, so it's like those are really expensive if you don't know. So it has kind of come back to bite me, like my newfound freedom of like expression on my desk. But and also it overflows into home. I actually just bought and built a new IKEA display case for all my collectibles that didn't fit in my old display case. So yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword because I love displaying all the stuff, but my bank account does not agree.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. Like I just started collecting Funko Pops about a year ago.
Oh no, get out while you can.
I know, like I didn't get it at first, and then I got my first one. I'm like, I can't stop now. I just can't stop. And being a huge Reds fan, they had like a Joey Votto night about a month ago. I'm like, I gotta go because there's gonna be a Joey Votto Funko Pop, and so I had to go to a Reds game just to get a Joey Votto Funko Pop.
So that's kind of how I got into amiibos. Like I have a whole shelf on my display case just devoted to amiibos, and I remember when they were announced, I was like, "That's stupid. I don't want an amiibo." And then I got for my old site. One of the last reviews that I ever wrote for my old site was Super Smash Brothers for Wii U, and for that they sent us a code, a GameCube adapter to play, and a GameCube controller to play with the GameCube controller, and also a Mario amiibo so we could test out. Because this was before release, so like we didn't have any other way of doing it. So I reviewed all that stuff together. So there was a Mario amiibo where I was testing out like how you could get trained like your AI companion, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, I guess. Yeah, I'm not going to really need anything else. This is fine. This is the amiibo that I will own. Okay, and then I remember for Christmas, my mom was at a GameStop and she bought. She was buying presents and she was like, oh, I got an amiibo. It was the only one they had, because if you remember like the early days of amiibo, it was super hard to find some of them, and I guess this particular location had one amiibo left, and it was a Link amiibo. And I was like, yeah, my brother, she was like, I bought it for your brother for Christmas, and I was like, oh, he doesn't really like Zelda, but you know what, give it to me. I really love Zelda. It's one of my favorite series, and he really likes Yoshi, so get him a Yoshi amiibo. So she did that, and I got the Link one. So then I had Link and Mario, and I was like, they announced the Sonic one. I was like, I've got to get that one.
Yeah, of course, yep.
And then I just got to the point where I was like, I'm going to get the characters I really care about. So, I got like Zelda when she came out, and Luigi, and I was like, oh, I got to have all four of like the Mario 2 characters. So I got Peach and Toad, and it just has spiraled out of control. Like now I have like stupid Waluigi and Duck Hunt and Rob and Shovel Knight. So it's really spiraled out of control. A classic 8-bit Mario in both like classic and like modern colors.
Oh, nice.
And then of course every Zelda amiibo imaginable. Aside from, I never bought the Champions just because they're from Breath of the Wild, because it's expensive, and I had to cut it off at some point, which is crazy because the Breath of the Wild is my favorite game of all time. So you'd think that I should get that, but I didn't.
It's a different thing when your wallet starts speaking to you. It's a completely different
It
animal.
really is, yeah. So amiibos have gotten out of control, and I did buy a few of the Disney Infinity figures because I'm also a huge Marvel nerd,
Hmm.
and I like Star Wars as well. Like I don't like it as much as Marvel, but I really love Marvel, and I like Star Wars a lot. So when Disney Infinity was discontinued, Target had this huge clearance of like they were like $1.50 or $2 each. So I went and bought all like the characters that I really liked as much as I could. So I have like Spider-Man, Black Widow, Iron Man, Thor, and then like all the good Star Wars characters, like Darth Maul, Kylo Ren, Darth Vader, Boba Fett, Luke, Han, Leia, Ewan McGregor, and Anakin Skywalker.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, you're right. All the good characters. You have to at least have
Yeah.
the good ones. So, real quick, because we're running about 45 minutes now. So,
Sure.
your favorite Sonic game and why?
Sonic 3 and Knuckles, if I can make that one cohesive experience, and I'll give you the justification for why.
Okay.
First
okay.
of all, it was originally intended to be one long game, but deadlines imposed by Sega actually made Sonic Team cut the experience short and break it into 2 games. I learned that by talking to Takashi Iizuka, the head of
That's
Sonic
awesome.
Team. He was also
Yes.
the director of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. They were supposed to make that one long game, and I guess Sega of Japan, or I think it was Sega of Japan, had a marketing deal, or maybe this was not from this was actually not from Izuka-san. This was from a report that I read. I think it was from Nintendo Power, where they. Oh, never mind. This was from Izuka-san. Never mind. The report from Nintendo Power was actually for Sonic 06,
Okay.
and why that went wrong. But the Izuka told me that basically there was a deadline imposed, and they had to break it off into 2 separate games. So they cut it off Sonic 3, and then they made Sonic and Knuckles, and they because it was intended to be one long game, he actually went to Sega's hardware department and said, "Hey, is there any way we can make these games interact with each other to give the experience that we originally intended?" And I mean, if you play those games, they're great standalone. They're full experiences. They're as long as a normal Sonic game is, but they had such crazy ambitions for that game. So that's really that's my favorite. I love the fact that like they implemented like a save system. You can level select after you beat the game. So like I love Lava Reef Zone. So after you beat the game, you can go back and play that as many times as you want. So I would say that's why that's my favorite. Even though Sonic 2 was my first game on Genesis, I think that Sonic 3 and Knuckles is far and away my favorite. It had super polished controls. You know, being able to choose Sonic and Tails, Knuckles or Tails to play as, like that's awesome. I love the blue spheres for as weird as they are. I was actually glad to see them come back in Sonic Mania, which I would say is actually my second favorite Sonic game. I think it's the best 2D Sonic game, just because you have decades of learning from the original games.
Right.
But I think just nostalgia combined with how much I played that game as a child, and how it still holds up. I've played it recently, and it's still a really great game. I think all those factors go into making it my favorite.
I could see that, and I did not know that about Sonic 3 and Knuckles being one cohesive game, which is really amazing. Because Sonic 2 is my personal favorite, just because that was like the first one I played, and I can still go back and play it and have just as good of a time with it as I did when I was a kid.
Oh, it's incredible. And by the way, another thing to go back to certain factors that I like of Sonic over Mario, I would take the soundtrack of Sonic any day over Mario. And I love the music of Mario, but like, man, some of those tracks and like when you mentioned Sonic 2, that hit me because that's the first memory I have of the Sonic franchise is making it through the first zone at Emerald Hill and getting to Chemical Plant and hearing that song and being like, wow, this is incredible. This song is just jamming. Like, I love this.
I can agree with that. The music being much better in Sonic. Oh, yes. Hands down.
It's funny. You can actually go back to an old episode of Replay. I don't know what episode it is or how you could find it. There's a Replay wiki out there. I don't know if they have it listed somewhere, but Tim Turry and I, former Game Informer editor, and he works at Capcom now. We talked about that. We used to do a thing called Sweet Nostalgia, a segment on Replay where we would discuss a music track from a game that we really loved. Like we we only did like 3 of them, I think, and one of them, the first one we did was Sonic 2 Chemical Plant Zone, and we talked about how much we loved it, and then Ben Hansen asked us. It was either Ben or Wade. I think it was actually Wade Wojcik, our former video editor. He asked us to do an a cappella version of it, and we did it completely unrehearsed, and we nailed it first take. And it was really cool. I don't know how you would find that. It's at the end of one of the episodes, and I cannot tell you which episode it is. And it's funny because I actually sent that to somebody I know on Sonic Team, and she was like, "Dude, this is really crazy and really awesome."
I'm gonna have to go check that out. I was not aware of that. I'm gonna have to go see if I can go find it.
Yeah. And one thing real quick before we wrap up, we didn't get back to like the moments that I really loved.
Yes.
That kind of hit me. And I would say that was actually one of them. Was I've been to, I mean, you know, I grew up a huge Sonic fan. I've been to Sonic Team's headquarters twice now, and sat down with Takashi Iizuka to talk to him for, you know, hours on end, just picking his brain. You can actually read the results of those on our website or an old issue if you can find that. There's multiple articles, including an article about why they did the lock-on technology, like I had mentioned. Sorry, I'm kind of folding a shameless plug into this, but I can send you the link. I think at the end of every Sonic article that I pulled out of this, there's like a table of contents of like, to read more about the getting Sonic onto Nintendo systems, which included actually a quote that I got from Miyamoto as well, which was another moment. Was I got to meet Shigeru Miyamoto at an E3, and it's funny because this is like the most on-brand thing for me ever. Is I was just sitting in on an interview. Ben Reeves was interviewing Shigeru Miyamoto, and Ben Hansen was recording, and I got to sit in, and they unexpectedly threw it to me at the end, and they were like, "Do you have a question? We have time for one more." And I was working on that Sonic feature at the time, and I had one chance to ask Shigeru Miyamoto a question, and I asked him a question about Sonic the Hedgehog.
But you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it was just kind of funny looking back. I'm like, wow, that was extremely on brand for me. But you know, it was for something I was working on, and I think it turned out. But so yeah, you have how Sonic got onto Nintendo consoles. You have why Sonic 3 is Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles are 2 games and the creation of lock-on technology, and you have where Sonic went wrong, which is just kind of like this long historical look at like the franchise and like its missteps along the way and how it's like trying to get back on track. And that's talking to everybody from Takashi Iizuka to Yuji Naka to Tom Kalinske, who is the former president of Sega of America, to Al Nielsen, who was the head of marketing for Sega in the Genesis days. And then there's also 2 installments of Burning Questions, which I don't know if you're familiar with that series that we do every once in a while. But Kyle Hilliard and I do this pretty often, where we get creators of beloved franchises or games, and we ask them, or even like just directors, and we ask them like these crazy lore questions that like nobody even thinks about. And I've done it with Ed Boon about Mortal Kombat. I've done it with Takashi Iizuka twice about Sonic. I've done it with Nogami from Nintendo about the Splatoon series. And Kyle has done it with Aonuma about the Zelda series and a few others. I think he's done it with some of the people from Pokemon. So he's done a lot of good ones, and I've done some pretty entertaining ones. Definitely check out Burning Questions on our website as well. So I've done 2 installments of the Sonic franchise if you ever want to look into those. I think there's some pretty interesting answers of like them thinking on their feet, of like me asking lore questions or us asking lore questions of things they've never even thought of. Like I asked like the Splatoon creator, like, when I don't know how familiar you are with Splatoon, but like you can sink underneath the ink and like swim through it. And I asked him like what the physics behind that were, and he was just like laughing. He's like, "Man, you're really putting it to me here." So there are some fun moments of like, you know, breaking like the seriousness of like the one-on-one interview with these creators and like picking their minds and just like, you know, having a good time with them. And I think that's a good time to read and also be a part of those interviews.
I am so jealous, but that sounds like a ton of fun, and just the setup to those sounds like a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity kind of thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's great. Like, I mean, it's funny when I met Ed Boon, I told him that like Mortal Kombat on Game Gear was the first game I ever got in trouble with because I enabled the Mortal Kombat version of the Game Gear version of Mortal Kombat. I got that version because my parents were like, "Oh, there's no blood in that version," and I found a code to turn blood on, and my parents found out, and they were none too happy with me. So I told Ed Boon that story, and he's like, "Well, tell your parents I'm sorry."
That's awesome. So there's one question we've asked every journalist we've had on the show. We've had Reiner and we've had Kyle Hilliard on the show. And we're going to ask you the same question. It's going to be the last question we close out with. And that is, if you have any advice for our listeners on how to get into the industry as a journalist, what advice would you give out to anyone out there who's looking to become a journalist in the gaming industry?
Oh, man. I mean, the obvious thing is just get experience. Like, get as much experience as possible. Be outgoing and friendly at events. Like, I mean, the start of my website that I was running, like the thing that really got us in the door with a lot of publishers and a lot of developers and everything, getting our name out there, was me going to PAX East shortly after we were founded. That's a thing that you should definitely do, is try to go to some events, like, go to there's always like parties and networking events after those, and those are super valuable. Like my first time at PAX East, that was my first convention I ever went to. I was staying in every single night until like 11 p.m. writing up the stuff that I saw, which, it was good for our website, but in the long run, like that wasn't the winning strategy. And I slowly started gravitating towards, going out to those events more and more, because you're meeting people who are invaluable contacts in the industry. Like we said earlier, it's a small industry, and I've met people that I wrote for at those events, and I've met people that at E3, I met Andy and Reiner and all kinds of people from Game Informer before I worked for them. And, they knew me from that meeting, like just kind of random run-in at E3 the year before I got hired. And it's like, I don't know if that helped, but it couldn't have hurt, I bet. So I think that like that's definitely a thing. And like if you're a freelancer, which I highly recommend if you're having a difficult time getting a full-time job, because I mean those are super hard to come by. It took me years and years and years to get a full-time job. If you're not writing for yourself, try to write for somebody else. Like pitching ideas to a site that accepts freelance pitches. Unfortunately, Game Informer doesn't accept freelance pitches, but like a place like IGN is awesome to write for. They're such an incredible staff of editors that will work with you to make your piece as great as it can be. I mean, I would have recommended Joystick. Unfortunately, they're not around anymore, but Kotaku was another great site to write for. So yeah, I mean, getting your name out there through writing freelance for other publications, even writing for yourself. Just write until you're relevant, pretty much. Like fake it until you make it is like, as weird as it sounds, like that's some of the best advice I think you can get, because like while you're quote unquote faking it, you're going to be honing your skills. You're going to be expanding your list of contacts. You're going to be, developing relationships with other people in the industry. Like, if I didn't have my own website, I would not have had the digital Rolodex that I have today. Or I wouldn't have been able to bring that into Game Informer, like having a great relationship with somebody at Ubisoft or having a great relationship with somebody at 2K Games. Like I wouldn't have had that coming in. I would have had to develop that from scratch coming into Game Informer if I didn't have that beforehand with my old site. So I think that just getting out there and doing it. I used to joke that when I had a full-time job that wasn't in the industry, and I would use all my vacation time to go to like PAX or E3, it almost felt like I was cosplaying as a games journalist when I would go to there, and then I would just be snapped back to reality when I would come back to my home and my full-time job. And that's almost how you have to do it, Like you have to kind of just act like you belong there, and with any luck and with hard work, you eventually will belong there.
Awesome. That's actually very good advice, and if anyone out there is wanting to become a journalist, just listen to the folks at Game Informer. They know what they're talking about. Brian, thank you so much for your time. Sorry we went a little bit over. I think Kyle had told me you'd be available for about 30 minutes. So sorry for going a little over. But
it's my own doing. I rambled for way too long. But it's all good.
Yeah, I have to say, it's all good. You're so much fun to talk to. So anytime you want to come on, just let us know. We'll definitely have you on again.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. And everyone out there, as always, have a rad day.